So today we are joined by Tatiana. Tatiana, would you like to introduce yourself?
I live on Vancouver Island. I'm a mother, I've got 2 kids, and I'm an artist of sorts, not a professional artist, but I just love making art. And I grew up in the US, actually, in California. I was born with dual citizenship and a new resident of Canada, which has been interesting.
Yeah. This
Yeah.
is why I've got my map on the wall, because I was getting so many guests from all over the world and I didn't know where anything was. So now I can look it up.
Vancouver Island, people get very confused about it because Vancouver City is not on Vancouver Island, and like nobody knows that. So they think that I live in Vancouver,
Yeah, but
which
you
I don't.
don't.
It's
Okay.
very rural, actually. Vancouver Island is a wilderness paradise, a
Yeah.
northern
I
wilderness.
think I've had another guest from there. Or I was watching someone's channel and they live there. There's definitely been a connection. Anyway, so
I know.
you're a viewer of my channel, so welcome.
Yeah, I bumped into your channel. I love watching everything about the trans issue because it's one of those things for certain people, I guess, it grabs your brain, right? Because it doesn't make sense and it's confusing and it's horrifying. I think for a lot of people, we want to learn about scary things to protect ourselves. And when people have been through some kind of abuse, I think that they can develop a ravenous, desire to learn about abuse. How does it work, right? Because people who have normal, empathetic brains don't even consider doing the things that some of these abusive people do. So that's kind of how I happened into it, because I was recovering from abuse in my own life and learning about abuse and narcissism specifically. And so then, and cults, I got really interested in cults, and that's what led me to the trans issue.
Yeah, all linked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's quite horrifying because I've been aware of trans for, well, loads of years and years, but I didn't realize how awful it was
Mm-hmm.
until about 2 years ago. I did have a brief encounter. I had my path crossed with someone who was trans who had a tantrum when I said no to him. Yeah, he applied for a job and yeah, didn't do very well in the interview and then said it was because he was trans and had a big tantrum and I had to block him off everything because he was just spamming everywhere and it was just ridiculous.
Did you
It
come to the
wasn't
interview fully decked out or just a little red lippy, or like what?
not really.
Okay.
I don't want to give too much
It's
away in
okay.
case
It's okay. Yeah, I just
just in
wanted to,
case, but yeah,
I just was
he wore a
trying to
vest
picture
and
the scene,
vest and jeans, but long hair and
okay.
he'd grown in places. So yeah, had a tantrum and so yeah, I had a bit of an experience in it. Like it's usually in the workplace where a man came and told me all about the plan for what they wanted to do to children and how they wanted to
Really?
be in women's spaces, the whole thing, yeah. In a um and that was about 2009. I was new in a job and yes.
Wow, I want to interview about that sometime.
So I went to
It's
my manager.
fascinating sometimes when you hear about people who had conversations very early on.
So I had a conversation with my manager who thought this person was wonderful and met them before. And I was really uncomfortable, but I had nowhere else to go with it. So because I didn't come across him again, I just forgot about it and thought he was a bit nuts.
Wow, yeah, it's like these little trails that just kind of die out. The little trails just kind of go cold, right? Like if you had a way to follow that trail and keep pursuing and keep asking questions. But people don't follow the trails because they're disgusted or uncomfortable, or it's just too much conflict, too much intellectual conflict that takes too much energy.
Yeah.
And some people just to pause, take the time, settle down and really listen and consider it. It's too much to ask for a lot of people. They don't understand why it's important to do that. And so they don't. Yeah.
And of course they want to be kind and they don't want to be, you know, they don't want to be the odd one out and make a big fuss because it's not polite. Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, I could go on about that part. That part, the be kind thing is just. I've had one conversation like that with an old friend who took that tack, and it really shocked me. I'm pretty newly peaked, actually. Like,
right.
moving around to my story, I had only been peaked for a few months when this event happened. What I was saying was, like, I've only had one conversation with someone where they were telling me to be kind. So
Okay.
it has played over and over in my mind, and I haven't talked to this friend since, because I think about it and I think, well, should I reach out to that person? What would I say? And then I can't figure out how to talk to this person anymore. You know, because during the conversation, I even said to her, well, I'm just concerned about these women getting raped in prison. And she didn't even answer. She didn't even pick that up
Yeah,
or
it's
respond.
like there's
Yeah, it
nothing
was like we
there.
were having two different conversations.
They shut it
Yeah,
out, don't they? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I got peeked off a YouTube video,
Okay.
and even though I'd had a lot of contact with people who were involved, in modifying their bodies and stuff like that. But like we've been saying, I just didn't think it totally through. And I was very immersed in left-wing activism. To Vancouver Island during the pandemic was spending a lot of time alone, as a lot of people were, and also recovering from abuse. And so I was really on my own journey. And so I wasn't interacting with society, with culture and people, and just accepted a lot online. But so I got that education online, and as soon as I saw that video, it was on a cult channel, because you have to find a doorway into the algorithm, and you just don't come across it,
Yeah, yeah,
if
you
you're not
don't.
in it, And so I was watching all these channels about cults, and then there was one. It said it was Andrew Gold, and the thumbnail said, this trans man is something about kids, what they're doing to kids, doesn't like what they're doing to kids. I can't remember what the clickbaity kind of thing. And I thought it was out of, it didn't ring a bell. It didn't, I had to see it a few times. And then eventually
Yeah,
I was like, what is that? Kids? What's going on? And so that's when I clicked on it, and I had no idea that kids were involved in any of this. And like, to me, just the idea that healthy breasts are being cut off of children. I mean, before, just as young as they even have, like, they barely even grow their breasts before they're cut off. Like, some of them aren't even grown, I mean, beyond the pale. Like, and so that alone for me, just learning that these amputations were happening, there's going to be like a certain little details that grab each person,
yeah,
and that was so shocking to me that I still, to this day, I cannot understand how anyone overlooks that, cutting healthy body parts off children for any reason whatsoever. Like, it's really a madness, and that would be called kind for any reason, and then there were other things about the interview that upset me, and jarred with logic, and then, because I was already in a pattern of chasing information, right? About how the abusive mind works. Like, it was shocking to me to understand that there are patterns. There's almost like a recipe book, and there's detailed tactics that abusers use that are the same across. And I just didn't even know. I wasn't taught that as a child,
no,
Now with the
no,
interview, I mean, with the internet, I wonder, if it must be kind of a different experience, but maybe not, because you can still stay isolated from information with the internet, because you're bombarded by all this other information that's taking up all your time, all the things that you think you want to know, and that you're already involved with. And then you're not pursuing things that are new, that you maybe don't even know are there. And the
yeah.
algorithm
That's the
keeps you away
problem,
from
isn't
it.
it? Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. they're flooded. Like here in Canada, it's really bad. The state media is horrible, and it's flooding people with all of this propaganda that's just baloney. And so anyway, I started, immediately, I was obsessed. I was watching everything, and I watched a lot of detransitioners but I was learning about how people are rejected, ostracized, etc., by their groups, their friends, their family, jobs, and so I immediately wanted to make stickers because I like making things and being artsy. And so, but then learning about people a lot. I learned a lot about things in England, there was, I guess just the UK, but England specifically, there was a lot of action, and like the mess we're in, I think it's called, that Grant Linhan. That I watched that entire podcast, like just getting the history of what had been happening. So I was learning about how people, and in England with free speech, it's really bad too. I mean, it's not free speech, and that's shocking. That alone is shocking. I saw how the police were coming to people's houses for putting up a sticker, and that sort of thing. So I was afraid, and so I didn't know who I could talk to. And so that's one of the reasons that I really wanted to go meet people. There was first thing I saw was a rally that was planned at the Parliament building, and Megan Murphy was going to be there, and a bunch of other TERFs. I'm not sure who anymore. So this was back in 2022.
Was that a Let Women Speak event?
No,
or was it something else? Yeah. No, not in Canada. Yeah.
I really hope we do. Yeah, she says she wants to come to Canada.
I don't think she could get in.
I know. They're giving her trouble. Yeah. I really hope she comes to Vancouver Island if she does. But it was a regular, rally with a stage and sound system and all that, but I was late arriving. And when I got there was no sign of any stage or any, production of any. It was just a mass of people on the lawn of the Parliament building and a small patch of grass in the middle with cops on both sides. It was the weirdest thing. I've never seen anything like this. One side was supposed to be like, it was the parents. It was the parents, organizing and multi-ethnic organizing. Of course, there's all kinds of, immigrant families and everything that don't want this happening. And so we had a very, diverse, multi-ages, but a lot of the teachers were afraid to go, though. I talked to one husband of a teacher who said that he was there to represent his wife, but she was too afraid to come because of the teachers' unions. The teachers' unions had actually been putting out videos encouraging people to make good trouble and that sort of thing. That's a quote from trouble. That's a quote from one of the videos that was leaked. It was some kind of trans activist talking to the teachers' union and telling them, go out there and make good trouble. And resist these parents, and so when I got to this event that day, there was this parents group on one side, there was police, a little bit of grass, another line of police, and then on the other side was this mass of people, just like it was like one mass of people, these trans activists. I have never seen any people behaving that way. The feeling of it, like as if there was a cloud around them of just vibrating aggression, and like their signs, but they're just like shaking I have this vivid memory of this child. There were kids, school kids from that side. This child, and she, pretty sure, was holding this sign that said, "We were trans kids." But it was a kid already. It was still a kid, and just shaking the sign and just closing her eyes and just like, almost like, in my memory, this person's feet weren't even on the ground. They were just in this mass, just like, rawr, it was like the zombie movies when they're moving fast and they're just all part of this, mass. And so, as I said, I've been to, I don't know, maybe hundreds of protests in my life, probably.
Yeah.
And because I was, very into Occupy and all that kind of stuff. And nothing's like this. Nothing's like this. This is not a normal. And that was something that I could see also from what I was learning as I started just seeking out information. This is not a civil rights movement. This is not a grassroots movement. No. And I learned right away about how the language was manipulated behind. That was one thing that really pissed me off, how they were going in and taking the word gender, putting it into policies and bills, and changing the entire meaning of the word with no oversight, with no public, recognition of what was happening. And they were sneaking around and changing laws and policies all over the world.
Yeah, that's absolutely what they did.
In a coordinated and organized way. And when I saw, this, supposed, movement, it wasn't a movement like any of the movement I was involved with left wing. I would have known if this was a big movement that was coming up from the grassroots, so it's part of why it was so shocking and annoying to me that people can't see that and that they think that they're fooled by it and that they think it's just this movement, in the streets of the righteous, grassroots.
Yeah.
So that was a strange, a strange day, but I got out of there. I went home and then I saw there was another one planned coming up. Well, world events, I think, kind of took the steam out of the organizing at that moment. There was a lot of international conflict. It was October 7th. So after that, there was this other protest that had already been planned, but there wasn't anything nearby me. And so I saw that there was something that was going to be happening in the city a couple hours away. I decided to go there, because as I said, I didn't know who I could talk to. And I really wanted to meet other people. I did find that the people, when I discovered all this, the people that were close to me were cool. So I was very glad to know that,
Yeah.
There's a woman that lives on the property with me who is studying to be a counselor. And I was just like, no, what if, she's not my landlord also, so I was like, what is she learning in school, and so, I spoke with her and she told me that she had actually had an experience with a woman who was going through this, taking testosterone. And that this woman had tried to attack her with the needle and had become very aggressive. Yeah. And so she already knew that there was something really wrong with this whole thing. And so I was really glad to know that. And, the other people that I had met, new friends that I didn't know that well, and luckily the few people that were in my life were people that I could talk to, but there was only a couple people that I know. Like I said, I've been spending most of my time on my own. So I wanted to meet more people. I drove over to this other city. And I already had a sign because I had made one for the first event. It said, "Get the cult out of schools." And, because I'm coming from a perspective of being interested in cults. So it was a natural direction for me to frame it that way. There's so many different ways you can frame this, right? And it just depends on each person's, personal history.
Yeah.
And so I went to this second event. I drove over there and it was very small. When I drove in, I saw that there was a group of trans activists already. The event was in front of the city hall, Nanaimo City Hall. And as I drove up past City Hall, there was this group of the pink and blue rainbow people. They all just saturate with those colors, and so conformist, isn't it?
Yeah.
So they were there in a group on the city hall side. And then there was, parents and public on the other side in smaller numbers. And none of the parents even brought a sign. So I left mine in the car and I went down to talk to people and started, we started right away. There was this grandma who said, I have 10, I've been reading everything that I can about this. I have 10 members of my family that are trans.
10
members of her family.
My God.
Yeah. And there were other, then so we were starting to create a little circle and say, let's get each other's, contact information. So I said, I'll go to the car and get a pen and paper. And when I went to the car, I also saw my sign was there. I grabbed that because I had noticed there was one woman with a sign that said, let kids be kids. And she was standing at the edge by the street. And there was a big, huge, Truony guy with a big rainbow flag. He had come over to our side of the street so he could hold his flag out, and obscure her message. So I thought, well, I'll go stand next to her, and I was also going to go back and connect with the other women. I just thought I would stop and say hi to her and give her some support.
Yeah.
Give her some positive, reinforcement. I didn't even get a chance to learn. I didn't learn anyone's names. It all happened so fast, right? I stood next to her. I held up my sign. I started speaking with her, but at that moment, this big man dressed all in black with big boots, and he was holding a sign out in front of him like a sword, right? Like, and walking straight towards me. And he stuck his sign right in front of my sign. And so I lifted my sign up, and he once again stuck his sign right in front of my sign. And he's close to me, and I'm just like agitated, very uncomfortable. And I just stepped back, left the confrontation, went into the crowd, but I was feeling shaky and I wasn't able to talk to anyone. I tried, but it was like I felt like I didn't even know if I was making sense, and so I went down to the other end of the crowd, which was sort of downhill, and I stepped out onto the edge of the street. There were parked cars along the sidewalk. So I started out at one crosswalk where I was standing with the woman with the sign. And then I backed up, I went down the hill, past about 4 or 5 cars, and then I stepped out again into the street, to the edge of the street. I held up my sign. I saw a car was coming up towards us. I remember making eye contact with the people in the car. And then I saw suddenly that dude was back and he was once again sticking his sign, but this time he put it right in my face. And, I had been taking in all these videos, and of course I had seen a lot of videos. Can you hear the dogs?
Can.
Is that going to be cut out?
That's fine. Don't worry.
They'll stop soon. Okay. So, I had seen the behaviors online. I'd seen what happened to Kelly in New Zealand, and I had seen little incidents just of women being harassed and treated so disrespectfully. And so I just thought, I'm not going to be bullied by this guy. And I grabbed the sign and I pulled it down. I said, no, you're not doing that to me. I've seen the videos. I wasn't laughing. I was very scared, and taking a stand. I just said, no, you're not doing that to me. I've seen the videos. And that's what I meant by I've seen the videos. I was like, I'm living in one of these videos right now.
Yeah.
That I've seen online. This is so weird. And so as I pulled the sign down, I have just the briefest flash of this visual image of his fist coming towards my face. And then I was on the ground. I was just instantly on the ground. From the edge of the street, the parked car, and then the sidewalk, I ended up on the sidewalk. I flew the length from the street to the sidewalk and ended up face down, kind of partly in the gutter. And then my face was on the sidewalk. And I remember seeing the little pebbles of the sidewalk and then slowly sitting up. Then very, very quickly, the police were on the scene. So that was good. They were nearby and they took me to take my statement. And as I was speaking with the officer, I looked up and I saw their progress flag was flying on top of City Hall. And I just thought, there's no hope. I cannot trust this system. Who is my judge going to be? Is my judge going to have, I mean, his judge, but, you know,
Yeah.
is the judge going to have a trans, you know, kid in his or her family? I had already heard, you know, stories of all this ridiculous behavior within even the court systems, you know, and then I thought I'll have to make art, just have to make art. That's how I'll respond, you know. So I did start a painting. I need to finish it, but, you know, so from there on, I can skip forward, you know, through time, but I did meet a lot of wonderful TERFs because of this. So my initial goal of meeting people was achieved.
God. It makes you feel less alone, doesn't it?
Yeah, people called me, you know, strangers gave me a call to check in, and yeah, and some of those people are dear friends now, you know, and I joined the Rad Femmes of Canada, and, you know, just discovered a world that I didn't know was there. That's a positive. So it took a long time for the case to go to trial. It just happened in April, so it was like a year and a half. Wait, is that right? Did I say it was? I said it was. Did I say it was 22 or 23? I get confused with the years.
You mentioned the 7th of October, didn't you? So that would have been.
Yes. I think at the beginning I might have said it was 2022, but it was 2023. It was 2023, and the 7th of October happened in 2023.
2023, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because so yeah. So I'm sorry if I said that wrong in the beginning. Maybe you can.
It's okay.
I don't know, but that happened in court too, and they asked me the date, and I was like, oh my God, what year was that? You know, I can't believe it took so long, you know, for the whole thing. So the trial was held in March, and then we came back in April for the sentencing.
Okay.
Right. So his name is Nicholas Mateer, by the way, Mateer. So the trial was obviously a strange experience, but most of it I missed because I was sequestered, you know, as a witness, because I was only considered a witness. The case was brought by the Crown Counsel. So I didn't have my own lawyer or anything like that, you know? So I was really just a witness in the case. And I was in a private room during the other witnesses. So I heard later about what they had said on the stand. But it was a 2-day trial, not a jury trial, just with a judge.
Yeah.
And on the second day was when I testified. And wow, everything that I was learning about when I was studying narcissistic abuse was present in that courtroom. I mean, not everything, but pretty much everything he did in that courtroom was part of the abuse patterns that the defense counsel. His job was to put me on trial and show that, and the guy, Nicholas, did not plead innocent. He pled innocent by self-defense or whatever, however you say that. He didn't deny doing it, but he claimed
punched you in the face.
And this guy is huge. He's twice my size and 20 years younger than me. And so he claimed that it was self-defense. And so the only way that there's no way to justify it, but in order to tell this story, you know, you can see his lawyer had this job to do, and he had to tell this story, you know, for his client, which, you know, he was going to do the best he could. And this was the one tack that they really saw to take, because he couldn't deny punching me. There were lots of witnesses. And so the only way to pursue this really was to show that I behaved so egregiously that there was no other choice for this guy other than just punching me in the face. And so it was ridiculous. It was really, really ridiculous. So when the counsel was trying to show that I couldn't be trusted, that I lied about, this or that, trying to impugn my credibility however he could. And show his theory was that this is what he kept saying. He kept asking me the same questions over and over and over, almost verbatim, certain questions that he drilled away at. It was so strange. And later I was like, maybe he was just trying to pound it into the judge's head, because I just, and maybe also hoping that I would slip up somehow. I guess that some people can't stand that process and they break because they feel like they have to say something different each time, or they feel like they have to come up with something new to say after they've repeated themselves so many times. I don't know. It didn't work with me. I just kept saying the same thing over and over, and one thing that the defense kept hammering away at was, he kept saying, if there's a cult in society, wouldn't you do anything to stop them? Like that. Very dramatic, very dramatic. Wouldn't you do anything to stop them? And so he has this theory that I'm so just amped up on this idea of this cult that I'm going to go and physically attack giant men. Stop the cult.
That's a ludicrous argument.
Makes no sense at all, especially if you know about cults. If you have any interest in cults, like, that is the last way that you would approach a cult. That if cults are about psychological control and, very, very, I mean, it just, there's like, but there was never any discussion of the word cult and why I called it a cult. It was supposed to be something that discredited me simply because I used that word. Simply because that word was unjustified to use, right?
They didn't like that word. They don't like it.
No, and that was supposed to mean that I was the crazy one because, I was this conspiracy theory lady, with the tin hat on, and there were other things that he hammered away at too. It's not coming to me right now what these other, attacks of attack were, but mainly that was the theory that he was trying to set forth was, so they told this story that Nicholas Mateer had just been standing peacefully in one spot, or maybe walking back and forth, because both things were said. The council had this series of photographs that have been taken with Nicholas in this one certain spot, but he was walking around in between those photos and doing things and even harassing other people on our side. I was what some of the witnesses had said, but and so this was, there was this whole lie that was concocted about how he was standing in one place. Suddenly he heard me screaming at him, and that he said that I had attacked his sign, everything. I mean, his sign was in my face. So, I did grab his sign and pull it out of my face, but he was the aggressor with his sign.
That's Darvo, isn't it?
Yes, it was all Darvo. Everything was reversed. The whole story was the opposite, and one of okay, they put him on the stand. That was surprising to us. We did not think that they would do that. And when they did, he made a total fool of himself, and he talked like a robot. He showed no remorse whatsoever, and just tried to explain everything. It turned out he found out about this on Reddit, and he said that he had ADHD, but wasn't diagnosed at the time, but it has been diagnosed since. And he had analysis paralysis, and just all this stupid shit. like he was just so overwhelmed because I was yelling at him, and he couldn't do this and he couldn't do that, and if he did this then that, and so he just ended up punching me, and he had this metal stick that he had, this metal, it was like a piece of trim that he had used for his sign, this aluminum stick, and he brought that into the courtroom for some reason, and it was bent at the top. And so it was bent because I guess when I pulled his sign out of my face, the sign came loose, it was just, glued to his, to that pole. And then he just had this metal pole. And one of the witnesses thought he had a sword, because he was like using this metal pole, like without the sign on the end. It's just a metal stick that, a metal pole that he's like, and then he tried to break it or bend it. So it had a little kink at the end, a little like 45-degree angle or 90. Yeah, it was like, an angle at the end where it had bent. And so,
I'm thinking Grim Reaper here.
Yeah, this big sign. I know. The theory is that he's over 6 feet tall. And so I somehow reached up there, destroyed his sign, and bent this piece of metal. And all of this happened, like, even if you just try to picture that in your mind, this small older woman, like, reaching up to this over 6 foot man with a sign above his head. How could I even reach the sign? Like, he could have just lifted the sign a little higher or taken a step back. He would see me coming. He would have so much time to react to that and to just get out of the situation. It's just absolutely so stupid. And so he was sitting there in court in the witness box with this metal stick with, bent on the end, and just looking like villain. It looked really bad in court. And so, obviously, okay. So, we were astounded that he was trying to justify this. It was a weird feeling to me, that he admitted doing it. And now there was this whole, formalized conversation taken very seriously about whether I somehow deserved this. I mean, there's nothing that would justify what he did to me. Just hearing it, regardless of the injuries. Obviously, the injuries were pretty great. I had, bruised up, face, a black eye, and it turned out later my nose was broken. That was another issue because the records weren't achieved correctly for that. But it doesn't even matter about a broken nose. There's nothing that would justify this behavior. And we're having a whole court trial based on this idea that he was going to somehow claim that I deserve this, right? So it's a very weird feeling. And it was hard to see how there would be anything other than a guilty verdict. And in the end, it was a guilty verdict. We had to come back, the next month. We had to wait a whole month and come back. But the sentencing trial was really hard to sit through. That was a lot harder than I realized. Or first it was a verdict, then the sentencing was another hearing the same day. For the verdict, the judge went through and rehashed the entire trial, which I didn't realize was going to happen. And it was very exhausting to sit through. Like, when you're in court, the lies are presented as part of the process, and so they're taken seriously in a way. And even if the judge believes one person over the other, there's still a level of respect to the process where the lies get repeated and get ingrained into the record, So it doesn't exactly feel like justice, especially with all that abuse going on.
Yeah.
And so it was really hard to sit through. And also with my lawyer, or the Crown lawyer, in the very end of the trial, she wanted to discredit his self-defense claim. So she said she took his story at face value to show that even if what he said was true, it still wouldn't justify his behavior. And there was still inconsistencies, in what he said and whatnot. But it just gives credence to these lies in a way that's very uncomfortable to sit through. And so I was really exhausted by the hearing. And then he went ahead and he did say, you are convicted of simple assault, I think it was. Then we came back for the sentencing. And he just got a slap on the wrist. He's not even going to have a record. I think that's one of the things that pisses me off the most, was that for 1 year, he has, probation, as it's called in the US. There's another word for it, suspended sentence, or I don't know. I can't remember how they call it here, but he has a parole officer he has to check in with, and, he has to fulfill certain requirements, not go near me, not go near a protest or whatever, and then he has to do community service. So, that's really easy to get around,
Mhm.
and there's one year, and then he'll have a clean record. It won't go on his record, and I think for me that was the part that stung the most, because it was just like saying, we're going to hide this for you. We're going to cover this up for you. No one's going to really know you did this. And the public is deprived of that information.
Yeah.
If he wants to go apply for a job and the employer looks him up and doesn't find this, the employer's deprived of knowing something about this guy.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's right.
Was
I
it in
think
the
that
news?
a little bit,
Yeah.
but
So it might show up
not much.
if the Google search for him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the only way, and the defense tried to act like that in itself was a punishment, and this is something I've noticed a lot, when the natural consequences of bad behavior are considered to be like, he suffered enough. Even in the sentencing hearing, his counsel was still insulting me, and us, still calling, still referring to lies. And he even called us deranged. And he was trying to say to the judge, these deranged people are making this guy's life hell enough already, and as if that he needs to be protected from the natural consequences of his own actions, because
How's it
he
affected you,
acted that
though?
way, and it's natural for people to want to object to that, to want to, reject him or whatever it is. That's natural human behavior, and this is part of what we're all so confused about right now, right? Is like what it means to just be a human or just be in society, right? Like we've had these huge changes to our lives and to how we communicate, and it's happening so fast. I always end up somehow coming back around to social media, and the internet, how it's changed our lives so much. We're really off balance. We're still trying to figure this out. Like, how do we live with this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But the natural consequences of people's actions and the idea of their reputation being destroyed, or, things happening online or whatever, people are terrified of it. But if you're going to go around punching women, then yeah, you might get some negative attention.
You
So don't
should
do
have
that.
some negative attention. So how's it affected you?
You mean like just overall, like the whole thing? Well, this is another thing, is that after the attack, I did make new friends. I did meet the TERFs, so that was awesome. But I still, and also being a very new TERF, I still didn't really know who in my life I could speak with. And so this huge thing had happened to me, but I wasn't reaching out to family or anything like that. And I wasn't telling anyone new about it who didn't already know about it, and I already have kind of some isolating tendencies, and coming through abuse, that's a huge part of it. So, I did sort of hide out and self-isolate. And that was part of my victim impact statement. I wrote a victim impact statement, which I didn't even need to write, but I wanted my own voice to be in the record. And I included a little bit in that impact statement about my perception that parts of the world seem to have gone insane. And there are these aggressions towards women, that are happening. And, I include a bit of that in my victim impact statement. And so, the defense actually took up my victim impact statement and tried to discredit that, and tried to say that because I went on a couple podcasts after it happened, and he played them in court. Yeah. And so then I was trying to explain that just because I had gone on a couple of internet podcasts didn't negate self-isolating, right? Like, that didn't seem to make sense in court. Like, oh, you're like this big superstar going on podcasts.
It's not like
But
that, though. You're
no,
like, at the
actually,
moment, you're in your own home.
yeah,
You're not
actually,
mixing with loads of people.
that's exactly what people do when they're isolating, is they go online.
Yeah.
That is part of isolating, right? That is a typical part of this self-isolating pattern where you're just going online and having your life online and not mixing with people in real life and not interacting, and not building bonds with your family and stuff like that, So I said a little bit of that in court, but like I said, the trial wasn't about these kind of ideas, right? And so, there was one point where I was like, no, this happens within relationships and within families and behind closed doors and in schools, this is where it's happening. But the judge isn't going to just become educated that quickly, right? Like, I don't know. I'm sure I really wonder how much the judge knows about all this, or even the defense
nothing.
lawyer.
He's probably not in the right algorithm.
Exactly. Would be awesome if this encouraged, some research. But even so, like, yeah, it's like, how much can I? So, yeah, so it sort of made me feel even more inspired to collect stories, when I'm done, sort of getting my story out there, to speak with other people, mostly women, who have been through being harmed in various ways, whether it's something like what I went through, or on a sports team, or, cancellations and that sort of thing. I would like to start basically collecting evidence, collecting the evidence of these harms, and, anecdotes in plural becomes data.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I can do, is talk to people.
Yeah.
So I'm inspired to do that. I'm inspired to give, I think some women and girls don't have, like, like I said, you don't know who you can talk to, and so there must be a great need to talk about this.
Yeah. Have you found a way of talking about it to people?
Well, at this point, it's been so long that it's not so, that the attack itself is not so fresh for me. But a year after the attack, I decided I'm going to write to some relatives. My family's not super tight, anyway. So it's possible in my family for something like this to go unknown, undiscovered by other family members. I would love to be in a family where people paid so much attention to one another that they noticed when things were happening to each other. But anyway, so I reached out, and I told my story to a few family members, and mostly the reaction is, I'm so sorry that happened to you, right? Like, people can isolate that one event and go, oh my gosh, this is terrible, I'm so sorry this happened to you, without taking in the whole issue.
Yeah, of course.
And getting any deeper than that. Yeah. But I made one mistake. I said too much. I started writing, to one relative. I don't know why I thought I was going to share this much with her, but I spent all afternoon writing a piece. I mean, it was a letter. It was something I intended to share.
Yeah.
But I took too much of an overview, a big view. And this person thought I was crazy and exposed me on Facebook. Luckily, I don't use Facebook, but it was a terrible betrayal, because this letter was just meant for this one person. I wasn't writing something
that's not right.
public. And she put it on Facebook where she and her friends were tearing me apart and, like, doubting me, and it turned out that she thought even being anti-trans was how she called it. I didn't look at it. I heard about it from a different relative, and I didn't read. I was like, just send me the screenshots, but I'm not going to look at them.
Yeah. You see, for me, I test people out in person. That's how I did it at first. It would be like, I'd drop something in and see if they picked up on it and see what the response was.
You have to learn
into it.
like how to approach it, right? Because we feel, this passion around it, and we know
Yeah.
like all these different directions you can run in all these different directions with it, but really for someone who's new to it, it's gonna be one small thing. Like for me, hearing that breasts were being cut
Yeah.
off was like,
It's different things for different
what?
people, though. It's different things I've
Yes.
noticed. Because
Yeah.
what I'll usually do is sort of drop a few different things in, and it's
Hmm.
different for everybody, which bit shocks them the most.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Actually, you're helping me put this in perspective now. Yeah, I think that with that particular relative, I think also she showed a quality of herself that I'm actually glad I learned about. I'm
Yeah.
actually glad I learned
Yeah.
how far this person is down their own disordered, rabbit hole or whatever. Like she, in her own like little algorithm. I need to take a totally different approach to that whole relationship and just stay much more neutral about everything, not share anything, right? Nothing's safe. I
Yeah.
already kind of knew that with this person, that it was hard to share with her, but now I see a darker side, right? And so sometimes you learn things about people, but I don't know. It's hard not to have contempt sometimes. Like for the one friend that did the be kind conversation. I also think that, like, when I think about that, I have so many different approaches go through my head, and one of them is like, how stupid. How can I respect this person?
Yeah.
Like, do I
Yeah.
want this person?
Yeah. It's really difficult, isn't it? When
Yeah.
people are so fixated on what they think is true and they won't listen to reason. It's
And this
and it's
person
not just this issue either.
Yeah, that's true. Because once I started learning about trans, a whole bunch of other issues were in that algorithm.
Yeah, of course. And then it all leads to other things, and the people who aren't in that algorithm are now watching the
Yeah,
propaganda in the news. They're fixated on this is this is what you have to believe. I
it's like a
shared a
basket full of certain
yeah,
beliefs, and
yeah.
you have to
I
kind of take
shared
the whole basket.
I had a guest on who was last week, Julie, who wrote this thing about Ukraine and Zelensky, and I shared it, and it was taking the mick out of him, and I thought it was funny, saying that I didn't like it was basically saying that they shouldn't like war and shouldn't want there to be a war. Shouldn't fund it. And oh my God, I caused World War III on Facebook by sharing this post. And I just couldn't believe the vitriol.
Wow.
Pacifism used to be an all right, okay view to have, but clearly
That's the
not
thing.
anymore. I got
That's the thing.
blocked. I got shouted at. Well, not shouted at, but like the interactions were, you know.
I mean, okay, logic, right? Logic. The logic of it. Like, even if someone felt in their heart, this love for, Ukraine and the Ukrainian cause, like, can they use some logic and
I know.
understand, like, think about war in a bigger sense, in a historical sense, and think about the imbalance of these forces, and how Ukraine is just getting slaughtered.
Mhm.
Generations, not just one generation, are
Yeah,
being
I know.
wiped out, like slaughtered. Yeah. And so just on those terms, like when Trump
And
came in and he started talking about the killing and the bloodshed, he was the only one who had
yeah,
spoken that way. And to
yeah.
me, that was the important part, was that he was thinking about that.
And do you know what I said? So on this post, I'd said, "Oh, my son's in the army. I don't want him to go to war and get killed." Oh, well, it won't be him. And I was like, "Well, it could be him, but it's someone's son." Do you know what I
So
mean?
heartless. That's so heartless, because that other mother could be saying the same thing, and it would be true. Like, I guess that's when they talk about suicidal empathy, it's like you're stretching, we're used to, as humans, we're used to having this small circle of care. It's all we can really manage, right? Like our family, our close group. And now with this, the way our societies are so intermingled, and the communication, the way it is, the internet, that circle of empathy is stretched so wide. And then it's losing its meaning because it's extending to the criminals. You know, like here in Canada, this guy got a light sentence because of Trudeau's changes. You know, some of what happened was because of these changes to the system. Like there was a law that went through that said that you need to release an accused person at the earliest possible time. That meant right away. The guy who punched me, he never went to even down to the station. Like you would think they would even put him in a car and drive him somewhere. Like he needs to have some kind of experience.
Yeah.
But all they did was talk to him at the site, let him go. And then later, you know, he got this light sentence. And I've never been a law and order person, but I don't want people who punch old ladies getting favored. You know, I don't want like these criminals to be, you know, we need to take care of each other. And
that's the thing. In the UK, what's happening is people who commit acts of violence like that aren't getting paedophilia and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That's not being dealt with. Whereas if you post something disgusting on social media, 2.5 years in prison.
Yeah, I've been watching it, you know, because I guess probably because of the trans thing, I got really hooked into, you know, paying attention to UK politics. And I feel so bad for you guys. I mean, I know I'm in Canada and it's kind of similar here.
Worse in Canada.
I'm not aware. Well, I'm not aware of arrests and imprisonments, but maybe I'm just not aware of it.
Well, the Canadian truckers, that was shocking.
Yes. And freezing their bank accounts like that and the bank accounts of people who just donated a few bucks. Like, I don't know why that's not a bigger deal.
Yeah.
To Canadians.
And as well, the assisted dying thing, is it MAID?
But I know.
Yeah, and I was talking about that on Facebook, and this woman who's from Canada, she's completely captured by the propaganda. No, that's not happening in Canada. It's working really well. And I was like,
oh my God, are you kidding me?
I think she's blocked me.
Are you kidding me? I know this guy that I've worked with in the past. He's a carpenter, but he is in a depression spiral. I mean, he's had trouble all his life, but I just heard he hasn't been working and now he wants to go on disability for, you know, mental health. And I'm just thinking to myself, and he's threatened suicide before, you know, that's part of what he does, like part of his cycle, you know, and I'm just thinking to myself, they're going to offer him MAID.
Yeah, they're going to encourage him.
They're going to offer it to him. That's part of what they have to do. So this suicidal, depressed man who's having a hard time working and his girlfriend's on the dole and they live with their parents and he's just giving up on life and he says, I'm going to just put my own self on the dole too. And I'm just going to sit on the couch and watch Netflix, and they're going to offer him MAID. Terrible. Like, that is a sick society. That guy needs somewhere to go every day.
Yeah.
He needs them to put him in some kind of program where he can feel useful.
Absolutely.
Even if it's something simple that they need to, you know, that would be a better, you know, than offering to inject him with deadly chemicals. Yeah. It's
really
and when
horrendous.
she says that's not happening, right? Like, I find that's why I want to do interviews with victims, right? Like, all we can do really, right, is just put the stories out there. And, you know, I know there are others who are more equipped to like, coordinate all the information, analyze it. You know, that's what I really want to happen. Like, I want all this data from what we're experiencing to be turned into things that explain what's going on and help us understand how to move forward. And I just pray that there are actually good, you know, academics and scientists out there that really want to do that work of what does it mean to be human? We can know so much more about that now because we're observing ourselves in so many strange situations, right?
Yeah.
I've learned, you know, myself, certain things that surprised me. You know, I wasn't sure. Like, when I saw the media changing and I saw that we were going to be going to more subscription based and independent media. And I just thought, is that really going to work? Are people really going to pay when they can just get it for free? But they do, right? Like,
Yeah.
and all of this, that Be Kind friend of mine, like the first thing that she said to me, the whole thing kind of, I wasn't calling her to talk about it, but when it came up, because of my attack, I guess is how it came up. And the first thing she said was, people want to appear virtuous. She had that understanding of all this.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually have that same understanding because I didn't see it as a virtuous thing. And so it's confusing, from the start. But for her, in her position, looking at the people around her, understanding that, and she has a kid who's in school. And she also works on textbooks. So I think that might be part of why she has to be so bought into it. But she said people want to be virtuous or appear good. And
They're not
that was
actually
something.
virtuous, though. They just look like they are.
No, it's the appearance for the sake of status and society. But it's interesting to me that that's such a driving force. I honestly did not understand that was such a driving force in humans. To be good. But in a way, it's kind of encouraging that this is one of our programs. Like, I feel like we have these programs. Like, at first I thought, when computers were starting to take over everything, and we would sort of say, people would talk about humans as in similar terms as having programming, right? And I would say, we're not computers, blah, blah, blah. But now I actually think that we created machines that actually do mimic ourselves in the way we work, and that we have these programs that can run, and you can click into a program, and suddenly that app is running, right?
That's what's on TV, programming, yeah.
So we have this kind of programming that's built, like with the abuse patterns, right? That's a similar thing where they're just on this narcissist programming that makes them behave in certain ways, and they all behave the same, which seems bizarre, but it's because within our human makeup, our sort of psychological ecology of humans, right? This is one programming, one set, when it's like a whole little system that you can click into, right? And that sort of exists inside, not inside all of us, because you do have to have a disordered brain to really do that. But there are so many of these little that we don't even notice because it seems normal, right? A lot of things used to just seem normal. We wouldn't have thought. UK didn't think they needed to put a definition of the word woman into their law, because you think what a word means, right?
Of course. Well, we do. We always have.
But with everything being questioned so much, then you can sort of see what are the things that maybe you took for granted that actually, where am I going with this? It just helps us to observe ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And to see what kind of programming kind of runs inside us, and the family, right? Like, I grew up in a hippie world, child of the 70s in Northern California, and fully bought into being the rebel, being, innovative, and thinking that things could be so much better, the utopian mindset, right? But now I see how the programming of, I don't even want to call it the nuclear family. It's just our natal families, or the family that we're born into. Sometimes people come into a family through other means, but that's the exception.
Yeah.
And that this truly is the bedrock of our experience, of our human experience. It's not disposable. It's not replaceable. But because it is such a strong programming, it can be used. The power of that can be used. The energy of that can be used if it can be hijacked, if it can be derailed and diverted, right? And that's also how narcissists work as well. It's like they somehow have this insight into how humans work in a different way that I had to learn from them, right? Like that they could see me and they could understand certain things, that's manipulation, right? That if they run experiments on people too, right? To see what works for each individual person. But I can see how I would click into a program, and then you can just kind of numb out and stay in that pattern and repeat, what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, just to say, I just think that we're able to learn so much about humans and about ourselves from all that's going on. And I just hope that it contributes to wisdom on a
Yeah.
bigger scale. I really hope.
Yeah, hopefully. So, Tatiana, we've been talking for well over an hour.
You're so easy to talk to.
Well, I think that's why I became a counsellor, because I do enjoy listening to people. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. It's been interesting and horrifying to hear what you've been through. It's not right. That's not how society should be.
Thank you.
We shouldn't
Yeah.
have to be worried about men punching us in the face in the middle of the street. It's
It's
barbaric.
outrageous. It's outrageous. Yeah. Yeah. But we stick together
Yeah.
and we tell our stories.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, and it was lovely to have you on, and keep watching.
Thank you. I will.
Bye for now.
Bye bye.